10 grandchildren. Beverly and I are in competition to see
I'm winning.
who can wind up with the most, and she just passed me, so we'll see. Bethany's talking about adoption, so who knows?
There you go.
And Amber's talking about foster care, so who knows? Anyway, before we get started, I do want to go ahead and ask Lord to bless our time together. Our dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you for bringing all of these ladies out. And Father, I pray now that you would prepare their hearts to receive what you want them to receive. I pray that you would give me clearness of thought and be able to express what you want me to express about this wonderful gift that you have given us. Pray that you would be honored in all we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, to begin with, I will tell you what you need to do for a background before you even begin to tell your child about sex. And that is, start praying now. Now. Before you have children, or while you have children, or before you have your future children, pray for them, pray for their future partners, pray that they'll trust Christ as their Savior at an early age. That makes all the difference. Pray for their purity and the purity of their future spouse. Those things are very important. Also, I would encourage you to not encourage them to have early relationships. And I'm going to read just a thing that is very one-sided, I will tell you that. It was obviously written by a mom who is upset with men, I think, a little bit. So take that with a grain of salt. But it does have some really important things that I think all too often today we think it's cute when little kids are pairing off. And we think it's cute when they're in grade school and they have a boyfriend or they say they're going out. Or we think it's cute when in junior high they're going to their first dance. Just listen to this a moment. When Katie was in kindergarten, she had her first boyfriend, and her mom thought it was so cute. When Katie was in 6th grade, she went to her first school dance with a boy. Her mom was giddy. She spent way too much money on a dress and snapped way too many pictures. When Katie was in 7th grade, she kissed her very first boy at a football game, and her mom thought, my little girl is growing up. When Katie was in 8th grade, she kissed her second and her third boys, and then her heart was broken for the first time. Her mom assured her, oh, you may kiss a lot of toes, but one day you'll find your prince. When Katie was in 9th grade, she started going out with boy number 5. One night, they were watching a movie together in his basement, and they went too far. Katie had sex. She didn't tell her mom. This is the story of the American girl. We scratch our heads and wonder why we have astronomical teen sex rates. We can't figure out why STDs are passed around among high schoolers like the common cold. We wonder if handing out birth control pills and condoms will reduce unwanted pregnancies. We are the ones that have set the ball in motion. We have sent the message that boyfriends are cute to our girls and that girlfriends are cute to our boys. I'm ad-libbing there because she's only talking about one-sided from girls. We have delighted in their first kiss. We have trained our daughters that their sexual purity is for sale to the first boy that says, I love you. Our daughters have traded their priceless virginity for nothing more than a cheap compliment from a horny teenage boy. See what I mean? She's got a little extra in there. And our God is disgusted by it. In Leviticus 19:29, it says, do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to become a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom and the land become full of wickedness. Our land is full of wickedness, and we can see that in our children. Look at the ads on television. Look at the clothing that is for sale for our little girls and how it's portrayed. Look at the models of those little girls when we see them in catalogs and how they're made up and how they're made to look. And then she goes on to give some suggestions of how to stop it. She says we need to repent as parents and stop thinking that little kindergarten boyfriends and girlfriends are cute. We need to stop allowing our teens to be alone and giving them access to a time when they could have sex. We need to stop putting our children in adult situations and expecting them to make wise, God-honoring choices. They're still children. We need to protect them. We need to talk to them about dressing, how their appearance is, and how their appearance can lead others to stumble. We need to nurture relationships at home, make home a happy place. A lot of girls run into the arms of a boy because it seems better than the mess they have at home. Feed her passion. If your daughter is boy crazy, and I'll put an aside right there, there was never a more boy crazy girl on the face of this earth than me. I chased after everything or anything in pants, let me tell you. I didn't catch them all, but let me tell you, I was ready to go after anybody. And it was a problem with my self-esteem, is what it was. I thought that if I had a boyfriend, that would somehow make me feel better about me. And that's not the type of esteem we want to foster. We want our girls to find their self-esteem in Christ and in what He has created them to be. Feed her passion. Expand her horizons. Find something she's good at. Something that she can, something that the Creator's put in her heart, something that she really excels at. So maybe it's playing the piano, maybe it's sports, maybe it's singing, maybe it's art. Something that she can focus her attention on besides boys. She'll still think about boys, trust me. But at least you will be channeling some of her excess energy. Her heart will be full when her life is a song sung to her Creator. Intend her for marriage. Speak highly of marriage and let her see you live out a good marriage. It's very important. Purpose her to give herself only to one and play an active role in sparing her from a broken heart. I'm not going to go into the rest of it, but that gives you an idea. I should also say that this pile over here, I have all kinds of helps and handouts after we're done. I'm not passing them out now because I've learned my lesson that when I do that, everybody looks through them and then they're not listening. So I'm not meaning to treat you like little kids, but I know from experience what happens. And so those things are there. They are for you. And I did include a copy of this because I do think it's very good, even though once you read it, you'll see. She's very one-sided, and she's blaming it more on boys than she is girls. And I'm sorry, they're equal. They're equal in that. They're equal in that. And I don't even have boys, but they're equal. All right. So don't encourage early relationships. You are going to have not just the talk. Sorry about that, but you're going to have multiple talks. You want to start early so that your children will come to you with questions, so that your children will look at you as a source of knowledge and truth and someone they can feel comfortable going to. Younger children's, the talks will begin when they start noticing their body parts. And your first talk could be, we don't talk about our body parts with anyone other than our family or our doctor. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we also need to let them know that no one may touch them. No one may touch them on any part of their body that's covered by a bathing suit, unless it's their doctor or their parent for specific reasons, such as wiping them or changing them. We even have to go so far as to say that because nowadays, unfortunately, there are cases of incest and cases of where a doctor can't be trusted. Once they're heading, during this time, I should tell you, during this time, I see nothing wrong with them calling body parts something other than the real name. For instance, my two grandsons, I will use them as an example, Talon and Mason. Talon called it anything below the waist was his bottom. So he had his front bottom and he had his back bottom. And he would say, my front bottom is sticking up. You know? And his mom would just say, ignore it, it'll go down. Okay. Mason comes along. Mason had heard them talking about bottoms, but he decided that he had a tail. And so he would say, Mom, my tail dripped in my underwear, you know, this type of thing. They went ahead and let them say that until they went to school. And once the kids are starting to head to school, they need to know the proper terms for body parts because other kids, let's face it, if they refer to their tail, other kids are going to make fun of them. If they refer to their front bottom, they're going to get laughed at. Don't act embarrassed, but just tell them, for a little boy, this is called your penis, that's where you go to the bathroom. That's where you go, as my kids would say, that's where you go wet. They hated the word potty, so it was that's where you go wet. And remind them again that it's impolite to talk about body parts with anybody other than their doctor or you as the parents. And if somebody else tries to get them to talk about those body parts, they should come and talk to you. You don't have to make a big deal out of it or scare them at this age, but just remind them that those things are not talked about all the time, because you don't want them experimenting with other kids and talking with other kids about that. They're going to anyway, but at least you will have laid the seed that you don't want them to talk about that. The idea is for you to open dialogue with your child so that they feel comfortable talking to you. Excuse me. Now, as far as the first sexual talk, you are going to want to have that talk fairly early. Find out when your child's school is going to talk about body changes and sex. This differs with every school, and it's getting to be younger and younger and younger at ages. When my girls were in 4th and 5th grade, they were 9 and 10 years old. That's when I talked to my girls. But you want to be to talk to them because you want to give them the biblical basis for the changes and for sex. I wanted them to hear it from me first. I didn't want them to hear it from Mary Lou down the street. I wanted to be able to present the upcoming changes in a good light, and I wanted them to know about the changes that they heard others talking about. Remember that your child probably has little or no interest really in sex during this time. They may, but most often they don't. And they will not be able to imagine what it's like to be that close to a person. So some of this is going to seem really strange to them. And tell them that while this is normal, they don't have to worry about it right now. This is something for the future. It will change someday, and you want them to understand what's happening. Again, the reason I say first talk is because it's way too important to have one quick talk. You're going to be teaching and training them all the years of their life. It doesn't even end once they get married. You're still teaching and training and talking to them. They will call you for advice, hopefully. You have that type of relationship with your child. You will want to have those lines open so they come to you first with any questions. And this can only happen if you talk to them often. It does not happen overnight. You cannot say, you can come and talk to me about anything if you haven't been talking to your child about everything. If you have a book, and again, I recommend the Before I Was Born series. This is one that I use to talk to my girls. It's presented from a Christian point of view, and that's why I like it so much. So much of what we get today is presented from the world's point of view. We want to present a godly point of view of the bodily changes that are happening to them and sex. You want to make it a special one-on-one time with your child when you do begin to talk to them about sex. And if you have a book with diagrams, that's great, but don't give them the book to read and then say, we'll talk about it later. Don't do that. Wait until you've covered everything that's in the book, and if you want to show them some diagrams in the book, just show them the ones that pertain to the talk that you're on at that current time. The reason I came about giving these talks, and I've done this quite a few times, is because of the way that I was told about sex. I was raised in a Christian home. Both my parents were Christians when I was born. My dad, in fact, is the Baptist minister, was Baptist minister, sorry. And so you would think that I would have gotten this really great biblical view of what happens to girls and sex, but that was not the case. When I was growing up, it was very common for you to have a washer and dryer in the kitchen. Don't ask me why, but we did. And this is the late 50s or so, mid 50s, I guess, somewhere around there. And for some reason, the washer and dryer was right there in the kitchen. My mom had on a pair of red flannel pajamas, and she was over at the dryer, and she was bent over putting clothes in the dryer. And it was breakfast. And my dad was a tease, and my dad said, "Ruth, you've got something red all over you." Well, my mom screamed and went, "Oh!" and ran into the bedroom. Well, I didn't have a clue what was going on. I mean, of course she had something red all over her. She was wearing red flannel pajamas. And my mom came out a few minutes later and looked at my dad disgusted and said, "Great, now I have to tell her." I didn't have a clue what was going on. And so she took me in the bedroom, sat me down on the bed, and honest to God, this is my whole sex talk. It was, "We're cursed from Eve, and you're going to bleed once a month." Wow. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. You're cursed from Eve, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to bleed once a month. And I'm like, why? Because we're cursed from Eve. Well, does everybody get this? Yes, all girls get this. We're cursed from Eve. You're going to bleed once a month. Would not explain it any more than that. That was it. No other explanation. So me, being the wise person that I am, She probably would argue that term, but anyway, I said, what happens to boys? At which point she told me absolutely nothing. And I thought, well, that's unfair. That's not fair at all, you know. So being me, I didn't right then, but that bothered me. That really bothered me. And so I started, when I was in the library, doing research on my own, as I could. I'm sure the librarian thought I was crazy, and back then you could go to the card catalog, just kind of look up what you wanted and go over to that section, get the book, stick it in another book, go sit down at a table and start reading. And so I became self-taught about the changes that were going to happen in my body, but I also learned that my mom was wrong. There's lots of things that happen to boys too. And so that is how this all came about, because I was not going to do that to my children. I did not want it presented to them that way. We never had another talk about sex. We never had a talk about intercourse until the night before I got married. She said, do you have any questions? Do you think I asked her anything? No, because there had not been the communication. There had not been the openness. There had not been that constant question and answer time with her. So I want to save your children from what I went through. So talk number one. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a drink here. All right, so your first talk, if you have girls, you're going to talk to your girls about what happens to girls. If you have boys, you're going to talk to your boys about what happens to boys. Since I had girls, I'll start with them first. You're going to start talking to them, and you're going to start with something. First of all, don't present it in a negative way. I cannot stress that enough. Do not hit them with that in a negative way. This is a wonderful thing. This is the way that God made us. This is how He has planned it and is working in us to prepare us for parenthood. You can start out with, you are a girl. And as a girl, you are very, very special to God. What a difference than hearing you're going to be cursed from Eve and Eve was not. Only girls can grow up to be women. And women are special to God. He chose a woman to be the mother of His Son. Only women can give birth. What a special blessing from God. Little girls grow up to be women. And we're going to talk about the changes that are going to happen to you as you become a woman. These changes are wonderful. And they're important so that you can someday become a mother. See what I did there? It's not negative. It's presenting it in a positive light. Let's face it, your first period is scary. So you want your child to come to you. You want to present it as a positive thing and not a negative thing. Soon your body's going to begin to change, and some of these changes are part of growing up, and some are preparing your body, God preparing your body, to be a mother someday. And some of these changes are, and you will get from my pile of handouts over there, changes in boys and girls during puberty. This is not an all-inclusive list, but I would say these are the most important things, and I would encourage you then to go over the things that are on this list. For instance, on the girls' side, I tell them that puberty, or the changes in their body, usually take place around the ages of 10 to 14, somewhere within that time span. That's 4 years. It's perfectly normal if you start at 10. It's perfectly normal if you don't start until 14. That's just when it happens. Each body is different. God has created you to be you and you alone. If we look in Psalm 139:14, it says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and my soul knows that very well. Remind them again they are made in God's image and that they are very special. So we're going to go over the changes in puberty. 1, your breasts are going to begin to develop. That's usually first noticeable by some swelling and maybe even a small hard lump under the skin that they will feel. And it can get sore, rubbing against material. And so I would encourage you as mothers of daughters that if you notice your daughter starting to develop, go buy her a sports bra or a soft bra. My mom didn't buy me one. It was agony. I had cotton blouses and I got sore. I mean, I literally got sore. And I would also encourage you that even if your child has not started to develop by the time they go to junior high or middle school, I guess it's called now, by the time they go to middle school, buy them a sports bra anyway. You do not want your child to feel like she is the only one who is left out and all these other girls are wearing bras and she's not. It's a small thing. Let her feel comfortable. Let her feel comfortable with that. It's very common for the size of your breasts to be different at first. One can be a little larger than the other, and this is perfectly normal and will usually even itself out just fine in time. Number two, your hips are going to get rounder as your organs developed, and there's going to be an increased size in those organs. Inside of your body is your uterus, and that is an organ in your body that right now is about the size of your fist, and that is where God will someday allow a baby to be formed and to grow if you're going to become a mommy. You can also tell her that her vagina is getting longer, her labia on the outside of the vagina probably going to get larger and a little more noticeable. This is all normal. There's nothing wrong with that. First time a child sees that happening, if the inner labial lips stick out of the outer labial lips, they can panic and think they've got a growth or something's the matter with them. This is all perfectly normal. There's going to be some increased vaginal secretions. You can tell them that in their underwear they might notice some yellow or white sticky stuff or crusty stuff. It's perfectly normal. It's just your body doing what it's supposed to do. Go change your underwear. Perfectly normal. Notice growth of pubic hair. That's pretty much self-explanatory, but you can tell them that grows above your vagina. Growth of underarm and leg hair. You can talk to your child that if the leg hair starts to really bother her, that she can talk to you and you can work out when she's going to begin shaving. You can tell her that you do shave your underarms and your legs, and you can have that fun discussion and learning time together on how you want her to do that, whether it be with an electric razor first so she doesn't cut anything off, or whether you want it to be with a blade, or whether you want it to be with something like Nair or whatever. That's up to you. Body odor becomes much more noticeable, as I know. So you want to encourage your daughter to take a shower. You want to encourage her to be aware of body odor and to wear deodorant. Again, when she goes to junior high, buy her deodorant, whether she needs it or not, so that she get in the habit of using it. And if they do take showers at school, which I don't know if they even do that anymore, she will have it to put on when the other girls are putting it on. Or at sleepovers, if you have sleepovers or she goes to sleepovers. Your skin and hair become oilier, and you may even develop acne or pimples on your face, chest, or back. This is all normal. This is one of the worst things that teenagers think is happening to them. When they start getting pimples, this is like the end of the road, you know. It's horrible. So I would encourage you to encourage them to do what they can to keep clean. If they develop a problem with acne, take them to the doctor, buy them whatever it takes that, you know, help them through this. Don't make them face life with horrible acne. It is such a self-esteem blow, really is. So I encourage you to help them with that if you can. You'll have a beginning of a growth spurt, you're going to grow taller. And you can tell them, girls often grow taller than boys, and that's perfectly normal. The boys will catch up to you eventually. But we do start maturing and we do start growing taller quicker than boys. Finally, menstruation. And this is where you're really going to get into the talk of telling them about themselves. You'll go into a little more detail about menstruation than you did the other things, because that's really important. So you can tell her menstruation or your period, because she will hear people refer to it as her period. You can tell her other names. If you call it something else in your family, you can tell her those names just so she knows. You can start with something like this. To prepare your body to become a mother, each month some amazing things are going to happen. Inside your lower abdomen is your uterus, and this is the organ in your body where a baby can grow when you get pregnant. Your uterus will begin to prepare for the possibility of becoming a mommy someday. And to prepare for this baby, each month it's going to fill with fluids, nutrients, and blood to help nourish a baby. It does this approximately once a month, a tiny little egg is going to be released from your ovary. It's so small you can't even see it or feel it. And it then travels down to your uterus. And if it becomes a baby, you don't have to explain about how it becomes a baby right then. Just if it becomes a baby, it will implant in that special lining, and that's where it will grow until it's mature and can be born. But if there is no baby, then your uterus needs to get rid of that special lining, and that's what we call menstruation or your period. And you can think of it like a sponge, that a sponge being filled with water, and as you squeeze it, the water comes out. Your uterus contracts, and it's going to shed that liquid in the blood to clean it out for the next month. Because you don't want stale, yucky, nutrient water and blood in there. You want something fresh if you're going to have a baby. It can be scary when you first see blood, because we associate blood with being hurt or injured. But there's nothing wrong with this, and it's perfectly normal. This is the first sign of menstruation is usually some brownish discharge in your underwear or when you wipe. Or it could be tinged with a little bit of pink or red. Again, it's nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. This is God's way of preparing your body to someday be a mother. It's at this point that I did a little experiment with my girls. I took a glass of water and I put it on the table, and I told them, even though it looks like you're losing a lot of blood, statistics tell us that you lose 4 to 6 teaspoons a month of blood. So I took some red food coloring and I put 4 to 6 drops of red food coloring in the water, and it turns bright red, bright red. And that way they can see that even though it's not all blood, it's going to look red, and they won't be as scared when they first see it. And if they've seen that ahead of time, then it's not as scary when they see it coming from them. It's still going to be a little disconcerting if you can remember you when you first had your first period. But since you've told them about it, they're going to expect it, and it's not going to be a big shock. And excuse me, you can tell them that this lasts 7 to 10 days depending on them and their body, because each body is different. And the first period usually comes about 1.5 years to 2 years after you first start developing breasts, just so you know. Tell them that they can come to you or to your husband, if he's there, if this happens, and we'll help you. If it happens at school, you can go to the school nurse or a female teacher if you need help. You don't have to go to them, just if you need help. At this point, I showed each of my girls mini pads, maxi pads, and tampons. And yes, I showed them all 3, even though my mom said tampons were only for naughty girls. I showed them all 3, and I actually took my red water, because I'm a visual person and I wanted them to see, and I poured a little bit on the mini pad so that they could see that it would soak into there. And then I poured some on the maxi pad so they could see how that worked. And then I took the tampon, I took it out of the holder, and I stuck it in the water so that they could see it expand and realize how it worked. Because otherwise, you don't know. Think about it. You don't know. You're shoving something inside of you and you don't have a clue how the thing works. It helps when they have a visual. It helps take the stigma away from it. And it helps them to know that Daddy knows about this already. Because there may come a time when they need to ask him to get them some pads. Our girls were constantly having my husband go to the store and get pads or whatever. I had 3 under 4, and so they were all teenagers at the same time. We went through a lot of pads and a lot of tampons. All right, at this time, I would encourage you to go ahead and give her a couple of mini pads. Give her a maxi pad. You don't have to give her tampons right now. That can come later. Tell her she can carry that mini pad in her purse, or she can put it in her locker at school, or just keep it in her underwear drawer so that she has something and she is empowered that if this happens to her and you're not there, she can do something about it. Rather than being at school, suddenly have this happen and she's got to go to the nurse or a teacher. It's so much easier if she can just put something on and then handle it at home. So I would encourage you to go ahead and give them something. Our girls, because we were a very open family, when they got theirs and Dad came home from work, the one daughter went up to him and said, "Look what Mom gave me. This is a mini pad, and this is a maxi pad, and that's a tampon." And he just stood there and said, "Oh, that's great. Why don't you put them in your underwear drawer?" And she did. She put them in her underwear. And then he looked at me and said, "I don't want to ever hold one of those again." He would buy them in the box, but he didn't want to handle them. At this point, I would not discuss cramps. There's no sense scaring her, and you don't know that she's going to get them because not everybody does. You can address that, when it happens, and look up remedies for that, such as heat and ibuprofen or whatever. And that is usually enough for the first girl talk. And it's a lot. And if you're a little girl, that's a lot to assimilate. That's a lot. You don't need to bring up boys. You don't need to bring up sex during this talk. And if she does ask questions about boys or about sex or, well, how does a baby grow, you can just tell her, we're going to talk about that at another time. We're going to have more of these talks. And we'll talk about that in the future. Tell her that you love her, that you want her to come to you with any questions that she has, that she doesn't have to be embarrassed, and remind her that since you were talking about her private body, that again, this is something she doesn't need to talk about with everybody else, and to especially be sensitive to younger brothers and sisters. You don't want her going to her younger brother or sister and talking about that. Finish by reminding her that God chose her to be a woman, and that it is a great privilege. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something naughty. It's not a curse from Eve. This is a great privilege that God has given her to be a woman. Close with a hug and a prayer, thanking God for her and the changes coming in her future. That would be your girl talk. That's talk number 1. Now, if you're the mother of boys, your talk number 1 is going to be about boys. Hopefully, you have a husband in the home and he's not deployed or somewhere else, so that you can refer this to him. However, it often falls to moms. It does. If a dad's unwilling or not available, it's going to fall to you, and the important thing is that you start out by telling him again, he is special to God. God chose him to be a boy, and boys are very special to God. Only boys grow up to be men and fathers. God is called our Heavenly Father. So it is a special honor to be a boy. In order for you to become a man, there's changes that have to take place in your body as well. Not as well, because you haven't even told him about girls yet. Never mind. This is the way God created him, and he doesn't need to be ashamed of it. Something like, soon your body's going to begin to change, and some of these changes are part of growing up, and some are part of God preparing your body to be a father someday. And I lost my list. Here we go. And on this side, we've got some changes that boys go through. For one thing, you're going to notice an enlargement of the testicles, the texture and color of the scrotum, and the size of your penis. If they have a daddy, you can say, if you've seen daddy, you know that he's bigger than you are, you know? And that's just normal, and that's something that's going to start happening to you. Your shoulders are going to get wider, and your muscles are going to get stronger and bigger. You're going to grow pubic hair. You're going to grow facial hair, mustache, beard. Also, arm and leg hair gets darker and longer. You're going to have underarm hair. Here you want to go over deodorant with your son, especially with your son. Not only is body odor noticeable under his arms, but I will tell you that body odor is noticeable everywhere on that kid's body, as well as his feet. There's a couple in your church, I don't know, some of you may know them, Steve and Gwen Carlson. Steve has been a friend of mine since we were younger, and we grew up going to the same camp together. His sister's one of my best friends. And Steve and Gwen were in a smaller home and could not have a small group in their home. And so Steve called me one time and asked me if he could come to my house for a middle school boys small group. And I told him, sure, you can come on over. Well, we kind of had a semi-rule at our house that you kick your shoes off by the door when you come in. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. These boys, there was probably 10 or 12 of them, came in and kicked off their shoes, and the smell was unbelievable. I am not kidding. So from then on, we had them leave their shoes on, and we put down throw rugs, and they walked on the throw rugs. So I'm just telling you, boys can really, really smell. So make sure that they're showering, make sure they're using deodorant. They, again, are going to have skin getting oilier, and acne may develop on their faces, their chest, their back. Again, what I said about girls, if this becomes an issue, don't think because he's a boy it doesn't matter. It does matter to him. Do what you can to help him get help with that. Whatever, the doctor recommends, or they've got that, I can't even remember what the name of it is they sell now. It's proactive or whatever. If that works for him, it's well worth the investment for his self-esteem. There's going to be an increased size of your larynx and your vocal cords, and this is going to cause your voice to deepen, and you're going to develop an Adam's apple. He may have never even noticed it before you tell him, but you can point it out. Look at different men. Some are more noticeable than others, but that's just the way God makes them. Some you can barely notice it, some it really sticks out. Your voice during this time can be high 1 minute, low the next minute. It can crack. You can be talking and suddenly it goes way up high, or suddenly it will go down low. Even though this can be embarrassing, it's perfectly normal, and it'll even out, and eventually you'll have a little deeper voice than you have right now. Some boys also develop a little swelling in their breasts. This can be very scary for a boy when hormones are raging through his body and he thinks, oh no, I'm turning into a girl. This is not the case, and it usually goes away between 6 and 12 months, but it is something you want to let him know, because I'm sure a lot of you have seen junior high boys at the pool or whatever, and they've got themselves man boobs, Well, they eventually go away if the child is of normal size. If he is overweight, then they may stay a little longer. Finally, you're going to talk to him about uncontrollable erections. I have elections down here, and I knew that was wrong. Although we have those too. Uncontrollable erections and his first wet dream or ejaculation. So I'm going to go into a little more over that. It's a good idea to explain erections a little more than you have all the rest of this stuff. An erection is when the sponge-like tissue in the penis fills with blood. And because of that, the penis feels harder, and it will stick out more than it normally does. And let him know that these will become more frequent. He's experienced them already. As you know from changing diapers, it starts when they're little, when they're very little. And it can also happen when he has to go to the bathroom. So he knows that it happens, but you're just explaining now why that happens. It's okay, they're perfectly normal. He won't be able to always control them. And that makes them feel a little out of control. It can happen when he's nervous or excited, or sometimes for no reason at all, and he may feel like everybody else is aware of it, even though, in all probability, he's the only one that's aware of it. It may help him to try and think of other things, something boring, or to occupy his mind, like maybe saying the alphabet backwards or something like that in his head. But erections can happen multiple times a day, and this is perfectly normal. You can tell him in his scrotum there are sperm growing and developing, and they are necessary in the creation of a baby later in life when he is married and old enough to be a dad. Explain that that emission, or that wet dream, happens sometimes when he's sleeping. And he can get an erection that he's not even aware of while he's sleeping, and he will emit some sticky fluid in his underwear or his pajamas. You need to tell him about that ahead of time, just like you tell girls about menstruation, because it's scary for a boy too. And they think, oh no, I wet the bed, or oh no, mom's gonna kill me. They need to know that it's normal, that it's okay. It may feel like you've wet the bed a little. You don't need to be embarrassed about it. It's normal. It's just a way your body's getting ready for the future. Clean up, put your underwear in the hamper, put your pajamas in the hamper, or if you've got another plan, you want to put them in the washer, tell him where you want him to put them. Answer any more questions that he may have. Remind him that you love him, that God loves him, created him this way to someday be a dad, and close with a hug and prayer, thanking God for him and the challenges and changes that are coming for him in the future. There's a reason that girls walk around school with their books like this, and boys walk around like this. Think about it. Think about school.
Girls always carry their books like this, and boys carry them down to their side or over in front of their, yeah, just letting you know. They're both embarrassed, is the thing. That's what I'm trying to point out. Wait a couple of weeks to let that talk sit in. So now you've gone over your number one talk. Your kids had a couple of weeks to assimilate all that you've told them. Now you're going to go into talk two. And talk two is you're going to tell them about the opposite sex. You're going to go over the changes that are on this piece of paper that apply to the opposite sex. With girls and with boys, you do not need to go into as much detail about the opposite sex as you did with them about their own personal bodies. Boys don't need to have the experiment with the water and the red food coloring and watch you pour it onto pads and see a tampon. They don't need that. They don't. So wait a couple of weeks, let that discussion sit in, set up another special time, and this time you tell them what's happening to the opposite sex. Tell them what happens factually and without embarrassment. That's hard if you're talking to a boy and you're a female. But remember, this is normal and explain just as there's changes happening to him, there are changes happening to other people and happening to the opposite sex. And it's important for them to know these major changes in both boys and girls. This is the way God planned for them to mature. You can use that guide as a basis. Explain that not everybody feels comfortable with the changes that are taking place in their bodies. And when they do not understand or they're feeling embarrassed, they might say hurtful things about each other or the opposite sex. Girls and boys make fun of those who don't mature faster or slower than what they think is normal. And they might make fun of somebody else to cover up their own insecurities and their own embarrassment. I'll give you an example. When I was in middle school, I had started to develop a little bit. And back in those days, we did not wear tighter clothing like tank tops and things like that. They were fairly loose, and I had on a white blouse, I had on a bra, wasn't any big deal. And a guy who was very popular in the school came down the stairs, and I was at my locker, and he said, "Hey Linda," and I turned around, and I said, "What?" And he said, "The left one's bigger than the right one," and took off. I was devastated and so embarrassed, I can't even tell you, because I knew the left was a little bigger than the right. But there's no way he could have known. But I didn't realize that till I got home and I stood in front of the mirror and I'm turning left and right and trying to see, and there was no way that he could have known that. He was saying that just to make fun of me, to make himself feel like he's cool and he's Mr. Jock and he's Mr. Special. So children can be cruel, as you know, in what they say to each other. Encourage your child to be sensitive to others and not embarrass them. Everybody goes through these changes at the time that God has chosen for them to go through. We don't want to make fun of God's timing, and we don't want to make fun of God's creation. So encourage your child and remind them they are fearfully and wonderfully made. The same verse, I didn't read it at the beginning of the boys' talk, but the same verse, I would use that same verse, Psalm 139:14. Fearfully and wonderfully made. It would be a good idea to remind them again that we don't discuss body parts with other people other than our parents or our doctor. However, their friends are going to start talking about things, and they're going to hear things, some of which are not true and some of which are not correct. And so they will often get the facts incorrect, in fact. If they have questions, they can always come to you, and that you're available to answer their questions. And that if you don't know the answer, which has happened to me, you will find it out and get it to them. Tell them that girls grow taller and mature faster than boys, and this is normal. Remind them that both sexes can seem clumsy due to this growth spurt. That's why we laugh about teenagers and how clumsy they get, and suddenly their feet are bigger and they're tripping over their feet, or they're knocking things over. They're just clumsier because of trying to get used to this body that has changed so quickly. They will need more sleep. They're going to be tired more often. They're also going to get moody and develop an attitude. Yeah, they get moody and they do not understand why, and especially in girls, they may feel like crying for no reason. I'm going to give you a couple of personal examples on this. Like I said, we had 3 under 4. So we had 3 teenagers at the same time, all girls, all going through menstruation, and their mother. Yeah, you can pray for Demi. And he came home from work one time, and literally all 4 of us were in tears. All 4 of us. And he just walked in and said, "Do I even want to be here?" And I said, "Walk out the door." Kristen, I can remember one time, Kristen is my oldest, and she was crying on the couch, and I went over and put my arm around her, and I said, "What's the matter?" "I don't know." And I said, "Did you get hurt?" "No." I said, "Did somebody hurt you?" "No." "Well, then why are you crying? Is it something Daddy and I did?" "No, I love you, I love Dad, I just feel like crying." So I gave her a hug, and what else can I do? Then later, we're in middle school at this point, and she is going back to school shopping, and we go to the shoe store. And we're looking at the shoes, and she finds a pair of shoes, and they were kind of like little booty shoes, you know, and she really liked them. They were in our price range. They had her size. They had her color. I said, "Why don't you get them?" "I don't know. What if nobody else has them? I mean, maybe I ought to get these." And she's looking at another pair, and I turned around, and she's got tears in her eyes. And it's like, "What is the matter?" She goes, "There's just so much pressure. I just don't know which one to get." This is over a pair of shoes. So I said, "Honey, we don't have to buy them today. Why don't you wait? You go to school. You can decide." So that's what she decided to do. So the next day, she went to school. She comes home from school, and she says, "Can we go back to the shoe store? I want to buy those shoes." I said, "All right, we'll go back." Back to the shoe store. She gets the shoes. In the car on the way home, she's hugging the box to her chest. And she says, "If anybody asks me where I got them, I'm not going to tell them." And I said, "Why not?" She goes, "Everybody will go buy some just like them." And I'm trying to think, but that's what you were afraid. Because you were afraid that you'd be the only one that had them. So those are just some examples of girls. I mean, I'm sure moms of boys can tell you examples when they were not rational either. They may not be as teary, but even junior high boys cry, trust me, or middle school boys. All right. Then you're going to close that talk also in prayer. I encourage you to always hug your child at the end of these talks. Physical contact can express so much love. And so you want to give them that hug, and you want to pray with them. And again, thank God for the changes in their body and in their future spouse's body. You do not have to bring it together right then. They may begin to start thinking that some things work out together, or they may have no clue. But the thing is, right now, that's all you tell them. You let that sink in for a few weeks, usually 2 to 3 weeks or a month, and now you're going to have what we like to refer to as the talk. The talk. Talk number 3, or where it all comes together. I'd like to read in Genesis. Sorry, let me get there. Well, I'm reading in Psalm 2, and since I'm in Psalms, I will read that there. "You formed my inner parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me when there was as yet none of them." And then going to Genesis, and we're going to go to Genesis 2. Excuse me. I talk a lot and my voice gets dry.
When do you have those in somewhere when you're handling the verses?
I don't, but I can copy my notes if you want me to make a copy, and then they could run it off in the future and have it for you next week or something. They're in there. But it's Genesis 2:18 and verse 22 through 24 of Genesis 2. And then it's Psalm 139, 13 through 16. And I'm reading in Genesis right now. "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground, the Lord God formed every beast of the field, and he brought them to Adam." Moving down to 22, which is what I want. "Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Those are the verses I read before the talk. Even though there's plenty of more verses that you could read, the kids are waiting to hear what you want to have to say, and they're not looking for a devotional at this time. You can do that. You can do that in the future and give them more verses, but this is usually enough to lay the basis and let them realize that what you're telling them is from God's perspective. Start by asking them if they've got any questions about the changes that they've talked about that happen to girls and boys. Answer those honestly, and if you don't know, look them up and get answers for them. This talk needs to be presented especially carefully. I would suggest that you do it in a loving and even an excited way. Act excited about this. Too often when we talk about sex, it's hushed tones, it's behind our hand, it's embarrassment, it's, oh, we don't talk about that, or whatever. Start out by telling them that someday when they're older, they're going to actually like the opposite sex. And when they're older, they may meet somebody and fall in love with that person, that very special person that God has for them. And when they do, they're going to want to get married. And a wedding is a time of celebration as two people are joined together before God to become a new family. And people bring the newly married couple presents. They express their joy for them and help them get started as a family. Marriage is God's plan. You can go back to the verses in Genesis and remind them. And He is just as excited about this couple getting married as the friends and family are. And God has a very special gift for the married couple. This special gift is called sex or intercourse. And it's a special time between a man and a woman and should be reserved only for the person that you marry. After the wedding, a man and woman now live together, and they do everything together, and they want to show their love to the other person all the time. They're going to hug and kiss a lot. They sleep together in the same bed. They're even going to see each other naked. And although that might be embarrassing the first time, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way God made it. That's okay. It's the way God meant marriage to be, and it's all good and natural and part of His plan. During the times when the couple is hugging and kissing and are especially close, the man's penis is going to get erect. The woman's vagina becomes moist. It makes a slippery liquid that coats the inside of her vagina. And as they lay close together, the man's penis can fit into the woman's vagina. He will have an ejaculation, and semen will come out inside of the woman. And there's many sperm cells in that semen. And if one of those sperm cells unites with an egg from the woman, a baby can be made. And this is how you were made. Every baby in the world is made by a sperm and an egg uniting. This is the way God created for us to have children. And this is how all the children are made. A baby doesn't grow every single time a mommy and daddy have sex. There are only few days a month that can happen. But they enjoy being close together, and they enjoy having that gift that God has given them. It makes them love each other more, and they feel closer together and closer to the person. There's nothing wrong with this, and this is the way God made us. That was very simple. It was just basically 3 little paragraphs that I told you. But that's it in a nutshell. And that's all they really need to know right then. And that's going to be a lot if they haven't heard it before. Yes?
Do you have this verbiage on the handout?
I will make copies.
Oh.
This is Kelly. This is what Linda said.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make this. I made everything else, but I didn't make this.
Sorry.
I just want to tell you that your child is going to react. There's all different ways that they can react.
Ew.
My daughter Kristen sat there. Okay. So you're telling me that you and Dad have had 3 times?
Only 3 times. Only 3.
So that's why I had to put in there that even though a baby doesn't grow every time, they still want to do it more often. She was appalled. She couldn't believe that Grandma and Grandpa had done that. You know, I guess she could accept that Dad and I could do it, but not Grandma and Grandpa. Grandpa's a pastor, for Pete's sake. You know.
Is this a talk mom and dad should have together with children?
This is a talk a mom and dad could have together with a child. Good question. If your husband's willing to sit in on it, I would highly suggest that would be a good thing. It will be even more embarrassing for the child, but it's good for them to know that both of you know about it. You know, and that they can come to both of you with questions. I want to tell you my daughter Bethany, who is my middle one, on the other hand, sat there the whole time I'm doing this going, bouncing on her hands, because I had told them that there were no questions until the end. You know. She's bouncing like this. And I get done, and she looks at me and she goes, "Can I tell you something?" I said, "What?" She goes, "I figured it out." She was so proud of herself because she kind of figured it all out from the talk about her and a boy that probably happened. Anyway, so they may be appalled, they may be frightened, they may be fascinated, they may say they'll never ever do that in their whole life, or they may have figured it out already. Talk to them about how they feel, assuring them that this is something that they don't need to worry about right now, and that it's God's plan for them when they grow up and they're ready for it. Not right now. When they fall in love and get married, it's not even an issue until then. Be sensitive to your child's reaction and answer any questions that they have, and don't be surprised if they have no questions at all right now. They are probably shell-shocked. Many of them are. I'm going to close in prayer, again, hugging them and telling them that you'll have another talk soon. Because as I told you, unfortunately, there's not just 3 talks. I put on here talks 4 through 200 after this one. And it's funny, my girls will tell you, Kristen, when she heard we were doing this talk, because I talked to her and Amber, they're both here locally, and so I talked to both of them, and I'm going to share something from each of them in a minute. But Kristen said, "Tell them about talk number 17. And Amber said, "Oh, I thought 237 was a lot better. You know, I mean, this is just them talking." But it shows that the communication was open, and they knew that we were going to have these talks, and they became more and more and more as we got older. I encourage you not to lecture on do's and don'ts. They get enough of that, and they will get do's and don'ts. They will also get the world's point of view, that sex is okay as long as you use a condom. They will get that, you know, this is a natural part of human anatomy and blah, 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 blah. Your purpose is to make your child feel comfortable talking to you about anything and to give them a biblical perspective. You want to be the one they come to with questions. You want to be the one that they open up to and talk to about anything. Every few weeks or once a month, try to have a talk on other topics. Here are just some of the ones. You can think of more, I'm sure. You want to do a sexual purity talk, recognizing love, treating each other with respect, development of babies, dressing modestly, internet and phone safety, emotional mood swings, body part nicknames. I didn't know body part nicknames until I was in college. I was so sheltered in the parsonage there that when I heard other words, I honestly didn't know what they meant. So unfortunately, your child needs to know sometimes there's derogatory terms used for these different things. Sex before marriage, babies out of wedlock, birth control, various forms, STDs, female orgasm, abortion, homosexuality, sexual harassment, rape, pornography. Those are just some. As you can see, there's lots and lots and lots of things you can talk about. I talked to my girls about birth control. I showed them a condom. I did my research on condoms. Condoms are not foolproof, and yet we're being taught in this day and age to have safe sex, and as long as you use a condom, everything's okay. You can still get genital warts using a condom. There are other things that you can get using a condom, to say nothing about protecting their purity and the detriment that it does to them to have sex outside of marriage. Let me preface this, the rest of what I'm going to say, by saying I am not here to judge any of you. God's eyes are what are the final judge. There's probably people in this room that didn't wait until marriage to have sex. And that's in the past. That's covered by the blood. We don't have to worry about that. What you want for your child is God's best. That's why I'm presenting it here. All of us are the same. My sin of stealing a candy bar off my mother's dresser when I was 8 is no different than somebody having intercourse before they're married. In God's eyes, it's all the same. Sin is sin. So I'm in no way judging anybody that may have fallen short in that regard. I am not in any way trying to make you feel uncomfortable. But I am going to tell you some things for your child that hopefully will save them some of the pain and heartache that people go through as a result of having sex before marriage. Spend time in constant prayer for your child. Let them hear you pray. They face things that many of us never had to, especially not what I had to. Don't encourage early relationships with the opposite sex. Take them to church, take them to youth group, encourage them to go out in group settings, watch the friends they hang out with, be sure to stay informed, remind your child what God says versus what the world says. And I pray that God would bless you in that amazing journey. I used to end the talk there, and then people wanted more. So I've got a little more time, so I'm going to keep talking if that's okay. So they asked about how we raised our daughters and some of the things that we did. So I'm going to include some of the things that we did. One of the things that, find it. Of course not. Yes, I've got it. One of the things that we did with our kids while they were younger, after we've had the talk with them about sex, is have them sit down and make a future spouse list. Now that sounds kind of funny to be doing with a kid that's in 5th or 6th grade, but it's not. Trust me, you want to do it before the child is in a relationship, before they think that they're in love. Before all of that happens, you want them to think realistically about what they want in a marriage partner. I made this, and I make copies for everybody, but it's comparing your shopping list to your future mate list. So why do you make a list when you go shopping? It's to remind you of what you need. Once in the store, you can't trust your memory. It's easy to overlook something if it's not written down. We've all done that. Fancy packaging and the daily special can sway you. You don't waste time looking for things you don't need or aren't important if you have a list. And you aren't disappointed later when you get home and you don't have what was on your list. So, how to make a list? You carefully consider your needs and write down all the items that will fulfill or provide that list, that need. Know your likes and dislikes ahead of time so that it's easy to decide if something's right for you or your needs. Take stock of your personal inventory and what would complete or complement what you already have in order to make those meals or whatever. Consult a master chef or a cook and ask that expert for their opinion and their suggestions. Look in a cookbook and see that you are including all of the necessary ingredients. 3, don't go shopping when you're hungry. You will be tempted to pick up things that only provide temporary satisfaction or look good. Hostess cupcakes. Rather than the items that are better for you and will provide longer lasting satisfaction. Be a comparison shopper. Don't just grab the first item you see, but look at the merchandise and pick an item only after careful observations. Remember, good things don't always come in fancy packaging. The contents or what's inside the package is what matters most. Don't compare the contents of your shopping cart with other shoppers. And don't be swayed by their comments. The items they chose are based on their list and their desires. Those items are for them and only them. You don't need to be as concerned with what other shoppers are selecting. Pick what's best for you. The items in their cart may look good, but could have awful consequences for you. They could even be contaminated or rotten inside. Avoid packages that have been opened or handled excessively. They could be contaminated. After making your selections, don't complain about a long checkout line. If you've chosen wisely, it will be worth the wait. Deciding to put some of your items back so that you can go through the express lane isn't a good idea. You may be sorry once you get home and realize that you've skipped over some important things on your list. You will still be hungry and won't have enough to keep you satisfied. Don't start tasting what you have selected until it is yours. This is stealing. Once you have been through the checkout line, it's yours and you may feast to your heart's content. Now your future mate shopping tips. Why make a list? To remind you of what you need and want in a relationship. Once in a relationship, you can't trust your memory. It's easy to overlook or justify something if it isn't written down. So that you aren't easily swayed by someone who just looks good on the outside or is available right now. And so you don't waste time looking for someone who isn't right for you. And so you aren't disappointed later. How to make a list? Carefully consider your needs and desires and write down characteristics that will fulfill or provide for those needs. Knowing what you want and don't want will make it easier to say no to a wrong relationship and yes to a right one. Take stock of your strengths and your weaknesses and what you need to help complement you in those areas. Consult your parents or others that know you well as godly married examples for their counsel and wisdom as you make your list. Look in the Bible to be sure you are including all God wants for you in a relationship. Don't go into a relationship because you're lonely or desperate. You're only going to be tempted to settle for someone who will provide only temporary satisfaction. Be choosy. Don't just settle for the first person who comes along. Carefully consider whether or not they meet the criteria on your list. And remember that just because someone looks good doesn't mean they possess the godly characteristics on the inside. Get to know what's on the inside before making your decision. Finally, don't compare your list to that of others looking for relationships, and don't be swayed by their opinions. They are basing their comments on their own lists and desires. If you have carefully prayed, sought Christian counsel, read your Bible, God will lead you to the person that's right for you. What others may have may look good, but they could be disastrous for you, and they could cause you great misery. And again, you will have that. And then, so we did encourage our girls to make lists. And I have here today a copy of Kristen's list. It's written in purple ink in her loop-de-loop middle school handwriting here. But she kept this, and she had it in the top drawer of her desk, and before she went out with anybody, whether in a group or by herself singly, she would read over that list. She took this very seriously. Kristen was my firstborn, a personality, and so she read over this list every time she went out. I'm going to read the list here in a minute, but I will tell you this, that she'd come home from a group, and she would know which ones in the group she wasn't interested in. And it's funny, she went out with one boy one time, read over her list before they went. Very nice boy in our youth group, Christian. They were 17. She was, not a little kid. Came home, shut the door, looked at me and said, well, he's not it. Just like that. Dating is done to find a future partner. Dating is not done just for fun. Your child may say, I don't want to marry them. I just want to go out with them. I just want to date them. I have news for you. Chances are your child's going to marry somebody they date. They may not set out looking for a marriage partner. But as we all know, the physical relationship is a progressive one. And it can progress rapidly, very, very quickly. And so I would encourage you to encourage your child, make a list. And don't even start worrying about dating and finding that partner until you're actually in a position to start looking for that partner. You're not ready in 6th grade. In 6th grade, if they have a dance, encourage your child to go with a group of kids, 4 girls, 5 boys, 6 girls, 3 boys, whatever. Encourage them to do group activities. I'm going to read you Kristen's list here. Again, this is hers, not mine. So she says, a Christian living for God makes me laugh. My family likes him. Someone I can have a good conversation with. He's fun to be around. Other people like him. I can trust him. He treats kids nice. Again, it's nicely, but she was in middle school. Respects adults, makes time for me, respects me and what I like or my interests, is himself around me, smart, nice looking, and then she put in parentheses, to me. Doesn't hurt me physically, likes to spend time with me, shares some of the same interests as me, likes me for who I am, doesn't want a lot of kids. Then she put in parentheses, no more than 2. She has 4. Somewhat spontaneous, someone romantic, someone that does things for me because he wants to, not to impress me. Someone that makes me happy. You can tell, she put a lot of thought into her list. Someone that's protective of me, has a lot of the same morals and standards as I do on certain things, is there for me when I need him, someone that's responsible, someone that I've gone through good and bad times with, listens to what I have to say and respects my opinion, someone that misses me when I'm not with him, someone that I miss being with when away from him, someone that's forgiving, thinks of me as well as himself, someone I can't live without and that can't live without me, someone that shares things with me and lets me know what they think, someone that's my friend, other people, my parents on both sides, pastor, people we respect, approve of the relationship, and finally, someone that will love me forever. And if I can get through this next part. Give me just a minute. Kristen found that man.
Yeah.
Kristen's married to a pastor, and they live up in Fort Collins area. And Kristen has been, in the wedding vows, we say, for better, for worse, for sickness and in health. When Kristen and Brent got married, Kristen was totally healthy. There was nothing wrong with her. She went through and had 4 babies and everything was fine. And then she developed fibromyalgia very badly. She developed fibromyalgia. And she also had a couple of seizures. And one of which, Brent actually found her shaking on the bed. She was bedridden for a few months at a time. And even just touching the bed she'd clench up because it hurt so badly. So you know that they were not having marital relations. They were not having sex or intercourse because you couldn't even stand somebody to touch the bed. Brent took care of the kids, again, 4 of them. He did all of the shopping. He did all of the cooking. He did all of the cleaning. He did all of the laundry. He's a full-time pastor as well. And he took care of Kristen. And I was talking to him and I said, I thank God for you because a lesser man would have left. Despite the wedding vows of in sickness and in health, this is more than I bargained for. I didn't sign up for this. This is crazy. I don't get to bed until super late at night. I got to get up at the crack of dawn then to drive the kids to school. They forget homework. I got to go home and get it. And he was doing all of that. And he looked at me. I was giving him a hug. And he looked at me and he said, I love her very, very much. And so you go back to her list and it says, someone who will love me forever. So she got what she prayed for. So I would encourage you, it's not silly, it's not stupid, whatever they write, it's what they want. And there's no problem adding to that list as they get older. Their ideas are going to change. Kristen changed her mind. She wanted 6 kids by the time she got married. She got 4. So they can totally change. The other talk that was really important that I feel we should tell you about, oh, let me share this little comic for you. I thought it was cute. This is an old Hagar the Horrible, if you've ever seen those. I cut this out a long time ago. I don't even know the date of the paper. 1999, March 28th. The daughter is talking to Hagar. And she says, where's mom? And he says, she wanted to be by herself for a while, so she went up on the hill. And you see the mom, and she's up on a hill, and there's a moon and stars up there, and she's talking to God. And she says, remember when I was younger and I asked you to send me a husband? And I gave you a list of the traits he should have. I said he should be brave and kind and loving, and you sent me a husband who's all of those things. And I thank you. But now I just have one question. Is it too late to add to the list? So make sure that you've got the list. Make sure your child makes a list of what they really, really want. All right, the final thing I want to talk about is sexual purity. And this is a talk that we did with our girls, And I would highly, highly encourage you to do it with yours. You've heard of True Love Waits. You've heard of, I Kiss Dating Goodbye. You've heard of all these different things about purity and commitment. And I do feel that it's something that is important. And this talk should be a really extra special talk. This should involve both you and your husband, if at all possible. I would suggest going to a restaurant. I would suggest going somewhere where you can talk. Not that's so loud that you can't hear each other, but somewhere special, so they get the idea that this is something special and important. Get a babysitter for the other kids. Don't have them along with you. This should be just a special time for the three of you, and tell your child how proud you are of them and of the young lady or young man they're turning into, and tell them it's exciting to see them grow into the man or woman that God's planned, and remind them that God made them for his purpose and he has a plan for their life, and that you want to help them reach that purpose. And God has planned for us to wait until marriage before engaging in sex. Even though they may not be interested in sex right now, someday they're probably going to be. And there's going to be pressure from others not to follow God's plan. Ask them if they want to follow God's plan. Be prepared for any answer. I haven't heard yet of a mom saying that when this was presented early enough that she got a no, but it's always a possibility. Your child may say, no, I'm not ready to do that right now. If that's the case, then you love your child and you pray for your child, but just like salvation, this isn't a decision that you can make for them. This is a decision that they truly have to make in their own hearts and before God. Ask them if they'd be willing to make a promise or a commitment to God to keep themselves pure, in other words, not have sex or engage in sexual relations until they're married. If you have the talk early enough, they will usually say yes. Tell them that as parents, you are also making a commitment with them that day to pray for them and to support them in that decision. If the child has grandparents that are Christians, tell them, mention them by name, and say they're also joining us in this commitment to pray for you. And if your child is willing, have them go ahead and pray and tell God about their commitment to stay pure and not have sex until they're married. Then you should pray, thanking God for that commitment, and make your commitment in front of your child to pray for them and to be there for them and to help protect their purity and to do what you can to guard them and not awaken love before it's time. In Song of Solomon, it talks about that toward the end of Song of Solomon. And the Shulamite woman is talking after she's had a very explicit book of talking about sex and bodies. But she says to her sisters, don't stir up love before it's time. And so we want to help guard our children and not let them stir up love before it's time. Not thinking that dating is cute when they're little and encouraging the hand-holding and the kissing and the dressing provocatively. We don't want to do that. We want to take our responsibility before God very seriously. God made many promises and commitments to his people, and he often gave a physical sign of that commitment or promise. And one of the most famous ones we know of is the rainbow in the sky after a rainstorm, and it is a reminder of his promise to never destroy the earth again by flood. The earth may flood, and it has, in some places, but it will never again flood enough to destroy the whole earth. We have God's rainbow as evidence of that promise. And it helps us to have something tangible to help us remember our promises and commitments. So to help your child remember theirs, I encourage you to give them something, some type of a token that will remind them of their promise or commitment. I encourage you to give them something they can wear. It's neat to have something to wear because then they've got it with them all the time. Others can see it, and then they can give it to their spouse on their wedding night. Wouldn't it be great for them to have that special gift that they can give only to them? We gave our older two girls necklaces, and Kristen said it was a little key, and they kind of took it as the key to their heart or the key to their sexuality. And Kristen said she loved having it right there at her neck. She wore it all the time, Bethany too, but Kristen's comment was, that's my line. And she said as she would hold it, it was a constant reminder to her, I made a promise to God. I've disobeyed mom and dad, and I know that. And I did make a commitment to them, but I've made a commitment to God, and this is my reminder. And she said, if you're in a relationship, and later when things were more serious with her and her husband, she said, it's like it was right there. That was my boundary line, and that reminded me not to go past that. So for her, she really liked the necklace. Amber, our youngest, wanted a ring. She wanted a ring, something that she could look at all the time, that she could see, because she said, the necklace I won't always see. But she wanted a ring as a reminder, and so we got her a ring. Each of our girls wore it from that day forward until the day they got married. I'm going to finish up with this little example here, and then if there's time we'll have questions. But when Kristen was engaged, the night before she got married, she had asked me to make her garters for her wedding, and she wanted, you know, a fancy one that she was going to keep, and then a smaller one they were going to throw, and her bridesmaids were all sitting around there, and we had been talking, and she was trying to decide how she was going to give Brent this key. And so we were talking, and I came in with the bridesmaids all sitting there and said, I have the garters done, and I held them up, and she said, okay, this one he's going to throw, and this one is his to keep forever. And then she went, oh, that's how we'll do it. And so she gave me the key, and I sewed the key onto the garter, and you can see the little gold key right there onto the garter. And she wore that the day she got married, and then that night she was able to give this to Brent and tell him, I saved myself for you. And every time I do one of these talks, I ask if I can borrow this from Brent. And every single time he says the same thing, I want it back. It's important to him. It was important to him. And it's interesting, one of her bridesmaids started crying after we made this. And I said, Tracy, what's the matter? And she said, to Kristen, she said, you really waited. And she said, that's a gift that you can give that a lot of us can't. And so she said, that just is an inspiration to me to someday talk to my girls and remind them of this story. For Amber, with hers, she knew what her sisters had done. We did the same thing on Bethany's. But Bethany's in Oregon, so I couldn't get her her garter from her. Amber wanted blue on her garter because that was going to be her something blue. She had nothing else that was blue, so we made her garter and we put something blue there, and she's got little rosebuds and stuff. But, and I'll pass these around if you want to see them, or lay them here if you want to come and look at them. But we sewed a little pouch right there. It's a little packet. And if you feel it, hold it up to the light, you'll be able to see that that is her ring inside. It's a little ruby ring that she had that was her constant reminder of the commitment that she had made to God. So that is basically everything I was going to cover with you right now. I have got all kinds of helps and different things. Should my middle schooler date? Yardstick for love. A lot of these are for later when you talk to your children actually about growing up and about dating and things. Maybe we could put them out on that table back there. There's a whole bunch of them if somebody wants to take those. And I will take questions now, and then I will go run off copies of my talk if you want it. It's pretty well all written out the way I presented it here. Yes?
So worst case scenario, he or she does not wait till marriage.
Right.
So there's a lot of shame that comes with that.
Yes.
So how would you kind of, I know obviously the talking concept is
Right.
to help them with that, but
Yes.
if you do have a physical reminder and now you have to take it off, that's a huge.
Well, but at the same time, I do believe that we can have forgiveness under the blood. And I would talk to the child and say, okay, you've made a mistake. They understand if they're willing to admit they made a mistake and that that was a problem. Again, God forgives our mistakes. And I would have her remake that commitment and take back the ring or take back the necklace as a reminder of the second commitment that she has made to God. God knows we're frail. God knows that we are sinful beings, and yet he loves us anyway. And it says that he sent his son to die for us while we were still sinners. So he understands, and I mean, you may have heard the comment, secondhand virginity. And I'm a big believer in that, that it's never too late to start now, to start from this day forward. One of Kristen's best friends when she was in high school was named Mike, and he is still a really good friend of hers, even though she's married and he's married and they've each got kids. They stayed close, but he would come to our house. His parents were not Christians. He would come to our house and hang out. He just liked our family. And the junior college was up the street from us. Kristen was a senior in high school. Mike was a freshman in college. And he and a couple other guys would come to our house for breakfast in the morning, just to hang out and eat Denny's cereal. And Denny will tell you to this day, they ate all of his Lucky Charms one day and he got up and was not happy. But anyway, we would have all kinds of talks while we were there. And Mike had come to know the Lord the year before. And we had had a lot of talks. And we had talked about some of this stuff, because I do give talks to high schoolers about trying to keep themselves pure and why they should keep themselves pure, and verses on how and so forth. And you're getting a bunch of those in those packets there. And Mike looked at me, and it hit me right between the eyes. And he said, okay, you know I love you. And I know you love me. But you also know, last year what you don't know is, last year I had sex with a girl. He said, the world said it was okay. I wasn't a Christian. My parents said it was okay. They just said use protection. So I did. He goes, but I knew it was wrong. And my question for you now is, you've been praying for your girls, you've been praying for their future spouse, and you've been praying for their purity and his purity. Would you ever take me as a son-in-law? And you talk about hitting you right between the eyeballs. And I paused, I did, you know. And we went on and talked about other things. And I had to, when they left, get down on my knees and talk to God, because I loved Mike like a son. He was coming to my house every morning. He's a great guy. And yet, what he had hit me with, my precious daughter, would I give one of my daughters to him knowing that? And it was God that finally touched my heart and said, yeah, if that's who I have chosen, then that's who they should have. And so the next time Mike came over, I pulled him aside and I told him, I said, I'm sorry I didn't answer you right away, but I didn't want to give you a flippant response. I had to go before God and pray. And I had to ask forgiveness for my judgmental attitude that I had. Excuse me. And I said, I can now, with a clear conscience, tell you that if you and one of my girls winds up together, I will be thrilled. Mike, like I said, is still a very, very close friend of our family. I don't think that would have been the case if I had told him no and there's no hope for you. And so I did pray with him, and he did make a commitment then to save himself for his wife. He did not wind up marrying one of my daughters. He didn't even date one of my daughters. They were just friends. Like I said, we did a lot of group activities and things. But to answer your question, I would say they could have it back if they made the commitment again. If they didn't, then that's something that should go in the jewelry box and stay there until they're willing to make that commitment. That's my opinion. Anybody else? Yes.
Do you have any insight into when to talk to your young sons about pornography and when?
Unfortunately, I think that we have to start talking to them earlier than I would have ever said for my girls. But with the internet, I would suggest that you get a good filter on your computer. I would suggest that you put it in a public place. I would suggest that they not have unlimited time on their phones or their iPads, and that there's mirroring things that you can get on your phone. My son-in-law has one for his kids. So anytime they send Instagram or anytime they post something, he sees a copy of it on his phone. He knows what they're looking at. And this isn't necessarily because he doesn't trust them, but it's because of this day and age. It's to protect them, and I think we have to protect them. A filter is a major, major big deal. A lot of families don't like it because it may filter you from sites that you wanna go to that aren't pornography sites, but because of something on there, it restricts you from getting in there. There's always a code that you and your husband can get into what you need to. But your child, if they're looking up the Civil War, they don't need to get into all the other stuff. So I would say early, probably right after you've told them about sex, I would say. You know, in this day and age, God wants us to guard our hearts. He wants us, it says that the eyes are the wealth, that's where we see things, and it talks about how when we see it, that we internalize it and it becomes a part of us. And I would say, you know, we don't wanna look at things we're not supposed to look at. There are things on the internet that man have put on the internet that are not pleasing to God.